Hey, Guru Nation, welcome back to the clinicaltrialsguru.com. This is Dan Sfera. We're waiting for Chris Sauber to join us. We're doing our very last webinar for 2016. So we do a lot of these webinars. We actually do one every month, okay, and they're free. There's other organizations that will actually charge you to join their webinars, which is ludicrous to me. I think information is free, all right? The days where you had to pay for information, those are long gone. Now you can get information specifically curated for your purposes and your immediate short, medium, and long-term objectives. My CRA Academy is a perfect example of that. However, information, just generic information or useful advice or helpful tips or just things that would provide value, content that provides value is free. And so we're happy to do this. And so we've been trying to be consistent with these monthly webinars. And we've actually been getting good feedback from a lot of the Guru Nation on the webinars. And many of you guys and gals are suggesting future topics. You're suggesting, and then you're asking really good questions. So we have a lot of individuals who own research sites. We have a lot of other people who want to join the industry, either as CRAs. So we encourage you guys to ask questions here. If you are logged in through your computer, through the URL that you received in this email, and literally this is the first time we ever did this, we sent an email out 20 minutes ago about this webinar because we weren't sure we were going to do it. But then I talked to Chris, who's here now.
Hello.
The Instagram Live is going on too, the first one ever. So we decided to do this because we want to keep consistent with our monthly webinars. Okay. So it would have not felt the same if we didn't end the year off the right way by doing a webinar like we said we're going to do, right?
Sure.
Oh, weird. We're doing what we said we're going to do.
Oh, that is unusual.
So before you got here, I was talking about how there's some companies out there that actually charge for this kind of information.
Sure.
For webinars, right?
Sure.
Crazy.
Okay.
Have you ever paid for one of those?
No. Have you?
No.
You participated on one in which it was paid for, though. Recently.
One of the presenters paid for it.
Right.
But it was free for the audience.
Right.
But there are some, they've invited me to speak where they actually charge the audience members.
Oh.
And I told the guys, I said, hey, I do this myself. You know, I understand you probably have a bigger email list than I do. Ours is like pushing 1,000. Theirs is probably 10,000.
Right.
But that's because they pay for their email addresses.
Right.
So anyways, and we're on the Instagram Live. So anyone who's watching, go add me on Instagram. Username is Dan Sfera. You can also add me on Snapchat, same username. I think Instagram is going to be big next year because they added the live streaming feature. So we're going to be using Instagram Live a lot.
Oh, good to know.
In 2017, right? So speaking of 2017, and by the way, if anyone has questions, type them in. If you are calling in, I will unmute everyone at one point. Let me see if I could even do that. There's a way to unmute everyone. I think we should probably ask our CRA Academy instructors
for getting your Shanae or Brenda.
They know how to do it. There is a way to unmute it for everyone. And we're going to figure it out. Webinar options. Here we go. Q&A mode. Attendees so right now we're in listen only mode. You're muted and you cannot unmute yourself. I'm going to put it in Q&A mode now. All right. So even if you're on a phone, you can just speak up and ask your questions that way. Or if you're on the computer, you can type it in. So let's do it to Q&A mode. You can unmute your phone if you want. Okay. And if it gets too noisy, I will mute everyone.
All attendees are muted and may unmute themselves by pressing *6.
There you go. All right. So feel free to jump in, ask questions. We are recording, so you're going to be on YouTube. So if you're interested in being confidential about your information, keep that in mind, right?
Or shy.
Yeah, or shy. Maybe there's someone from the FDA on.
They're not shy.
That was the last webinar, right?
That was.
Yeah, we're attracting them. So, okay, speaking of 2017, this is what this webinar is going to be about. And we're already seeing, so for those of you that don't know, we do consulting as well through our consulting company, DSCS Sweat Equity and Investments, which is also the parent company of our CRO, DSCS CRO, which we signed our first CDA as a CRO for a client. So hopefully in early 2017, we get started on that. Mm-hmm. We've already started like very preliminary stuff, but at least that CDA was signed, right? We're off.
Right.
We're entering 2017 in second gear rather than first.
Or fourth.
I wish it was fourth. It's more like second gear. All right.
Sure.
That's all right. It's good. So we're seeing a lot in our consulting side when we do biz dev. So thank you, Joel. So we're seeing a lot of studies in this last fourth quarter, and then lately, I mean, we've been seeing tons of studies. So what are some of the studies you've seen, like indications?
Well, Alzheimer's is the most prevalent at this point.
There's a lot of Alzheimer's, right?
Mm.
So if you're a site that can get Alzheimer's patients, and by getting Alzheimer's patients, we even mean if you're able to get one patient, it's worth doing.
Yep. They pay well.
They pay well. What other indications? I know with Saleh, I just interviewed him. They're doing a lot of women's health studies. Mm-hmm. Right? Anything else you've seen?
I mean, of course, it's not unusual. There's a lot of oncology trials.
That's always the case. Yeah.
Correct.
So a lot of you research site owners that just started this year or started this last part of 2016, you started at the right time, right? The market is in your favor. It looks like a lot of supply of studies coming out.
And the CNS pipeline is supposed to be expanding.
And by CNS, that's central nervous system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So CNS pipeline expanding. I mean, so the bottom line is if you're a research site owner, be prepared for an onslaught of studies. We just talked to a client yesterday. Yeah, go ahead. We talked to a client yesterday. It was actually Ashley from Dayton, Ohio. So you can watch that interview with her on YouTube. That one's gotten a bunch of views. She's already been busy this year. She started in March of 2016. And she's already gotten like 6 studies started. And I told her, that's nothing. 2017, just be ready for twice that amount. So if you just started a site, that doesn't mean you're going to get 12 studies next year, but you're much more likely to have a good amount of studies, an amount that Chris and I would feel comfortable with if it was our first site and our first year, right?
Sure.
Like the timing is perfect.
For getting trials.
For getting trials, at least for now.
Yes.
We'll see how this plays out. The thing in this industry is everything moves slowly. So trends take long to develop, and then they tend to stay that way. Mm-hmm. And then, so when I entered this industry, we were in an uptrend. I entered in 2005. We were in an uptrend until 2008. Mm-hmm. And that was the Great Recession, right? Yeah. So studies started canceling quickly.
There was other dynamics involved. We're not going to get into politics.
Yeah, we're not going to get into politics, but
there was some worry over Obamacare.
And Obamacare was going to take effect. So there was a lot of pessimism in the clinical research industry at that time. Couple that with the Great Recession. But even that wasn't quick. Like, yeah, we had some studies end suddenly. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, they just, the amount of work sort of fizzled out. And it stayed that way until about 2014, right?
Maybe even 2015.
Maybe even 2015.
I would say it's just been picking up over the last year, really.
Yeah, I would say 2016 was neutral as far as like the amount of studies out there.
Yeah, I would agree.
We weren't in a downturn. We weren't in an upturn. It was just, I think that was more of a normal market. Mm-hmm. And the studies that were coming out were complex.
Yeah, I was going to mention that they've got more difficult.
Yes. And we'll see how that plays out. Okay, so that's the mystery for 2017. We do know there's going to be an increase in supply of the studies. However, we don't know whether studies are going to get more complex or less complex.
Right. So when there was a lot of studies to be had, the studies typically were a little more simple to either recruit patients or conduct or both, right?
Right.
When there was a large supply. So hopefully that occurs again.
I'm a big believer in supply and demand market dynamics.
Sure.
But we'll see. I mean, maybe there's no maybe. We know there's a much bigger supply of studies now. However, what remains to be seen, and we only have anecdotal evidence. I mean, we have a pretty good sample size, but we only have anecdotal evidence, and it's still a small percentage of the industry in general, of sites that participate.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't know if there's also been a huge increase in the number of sites that opened up, right?
True.
Just like our CRO, we're looking for research-naive sites for our projects so that we don't have to deal with these patient recruitment problems.
Right.
So if you find those sites research-naive, meaning they've never done research, right? And you get them to do research, so now you just introduced a new competitor to the market.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the studies don't necessarily have to get less complex, right? The supply and demand dynamics don't necessarily need to work there because you're adding more sites too.
Sure.
So the whole supply demand curve kind of stays at the same slope.
But at the same time, even taking that into consideration, I think you still have a whittling down of sites because, as the Statistica you've pointed out a number of times, most that do one trial, it's their first and last.
Right.
The majority.
Mm-hmm.
So
no different than any other business. So that's what we're seeing for research sites. So definitely more studies, a lot of CDAs. Get ready for a lot of site selection visits. Now, one of the advantages that sites have now is you can negotiate better budgets, better contracts, better terms,
sure.
Right? And we do that for clients.
We do.
Are you noticing that they're easing up on the negotiations? They meaning the sponsors and CROs.
Actually, I've never really thought about it until just now, and I would say yes.
Give an example.
I would say a year ago, I got a lot of this is the budget. I mean, not necessarily the first budget, but there would be one round of negotiation, and then you would come back and say, no, we need more. I'm simplifying things here.
Yeah, sure.
And then they would say, well, this is the budget, take it or leave it. I have not seen that anymore. Now it's, okay, we'll send it up to the sponsor, and typically it comes back approved, so long as it's not too unrealistic.
I love supply and demand. So they're getting, they're getting a little easier to deal with because they know that sites have more options now.
Sure. And to simplify that, there's more money to be made now.
Right.
Per trial.
There you go. And so for you as a research site owner or a site director, whatever the case may be, PI, you could be more selective now about the trials you get, in addition to negotiating a little tougher. So in a downturn, the initial, I guess, response by sites is to just take any study they can get, right?
You're forced in that position.
It's a survival mechanism. But now we don't necessarily need to do that anymore. You don't need to be as selective.
Well, if you're a research naive site, I would disagree with that a little bit.
So explain, because there are a lot of research naive sites out there watching.
I would think as a research naive site, you want to take any trial you can get patients for initially, regardless of budget. Mm-hmm. As a matter of fact, one of the attendees, Joel, that you thanked, he had this just occurred. Received a trial that didn't pay the greatest, a simple trial though, mm-hmm. And it's a good way to start. If there's some research, what's the word? Naivety? Is that a word?
Naivete, I believe.
Okay, so the site's research naive, and
yeah,
and it's a good way to start. That way, you're not risking anything. If you're going to lose a trial, lose one you don't care a whole lot about. There's not a lot of money to be made there, which is the case here. You don't want to lose a great study as your first trial.
Right.
If you get that great study, you would like to have a little experience going in. That way you're not risking anything.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
So what, in a nutshell, what's your advice to the research naive? To the research naive sites?
Well, best case scenario would be to take a phase 4 trial as your first study.
Okay.
Best case scenario. The easiest to do. They're very laxed. Typically, a phase 4 or always a phase 4. The drug's already on market.
Yep.
The FDA doesn't really care. It's more a marketing strategy, but it still gives you a grasp of how research works. But the catch here is you're not going to really commit any serious deviations because they're not concerned with safety. So it's a simple trial, but you get the grasp.
Okay.
They don't pay well at all, typically. We've seen a couple that do, but for the most part, they don't. So that's a good place to get your feet wet, phase 4. But that being said, you can always, beggars can't be choosers. So
right.
If any trial is a good trial to start with, obviously you want to get a trial. It would be nice if you could start with something that you're not too concerned about making errors on, and if I should lose this because I made a major faux pas, it's not a big deal to me. I didn't really want it to begin with. That's a good place to approach from. You have a great study. Obviously, you're going to be under a little more stress. You want to do everything correctly, and you're not going to know everything. Like our colleague in Baltimore.
Yeah, solid. So we just interviewed him. So yeah. What's the deal there?
So took on a partner in Baltimore, and
years ago.
Yeah, and his first trial.
And you can watch those. You can watch that interview on YouTube, youtube.com/Dan Sfera, and just search Dan Sfera and Continental Clinical Research.
So his first trial was a good one. Paid very well, easy to get the patients for. I think he screened something like 50 or 60 patients. The trial paid very well. The problem was he made a major error in the consenting process and lost the trial.
Yeah.
So
a victim of our own procedures.
Yeah.
Of our own SOPs.
Yeah. So there was a little bit more involved there.
And that was during a down period in research.
Right.
And he's still okay. I mean, he's still got more state. There's an element of luck there. I think location's important as well.
Sure.
But yeah, don't make those mistakes. Even though there's a huge supply of studies, you can still make a bad name for yourself and develop a bad reputation for yourself if you don't know what you're doing. So definitely don't take on more studies than you think you can handle. If you're brand new, start with one.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
There's going to be more studies that we're just entering this uptrend in the market. And we're very happy about that. Okay, there's like 9 minutes left. CRAs, jobs, right? So we're seeing a lot. I've put my CV out there just to get a feel for the market. I'm getting calls every day from recruiters. So they're hiring. Now, mind you, I have no context because I haven't put my CV out there.
But it would lend you to believe that they're preparing.
There's a lot
for an expansion.
Yes.
In research.
Yes, and it only makes sense because if we're seeing more studies, I mean that we are seeing, right? We're seeing more studies. If the CROs and sponsors are hiring even more CRAs now, that would indicate that very likely 2017 is going to be even busier in the second half of 2017. Yeah. So, I mean, why else would they hire? We had one of our students from our CRA Academy get hired today.
We did.
Right?
Yep.
I think they're watching. But so they might be on Instagram, I believe. I can't see from here. But yeah, and then we've got another one got hired 2 weeks ago. Another one got hired last month. I would have been hired, but I'm only looking for remote contract, very specific stuff. I can't be a full-time employee going to the office every day for a CRO. I just don't have the time for that. But I would have been hired already.
Sure.
And a lot of our students have been getting interviews, and they're on their second, third round of interviews for the ones that haven't gotten hired. So if you're having a problem getting hired as a CRA or even getting an interview, that would indicate that you're probably reaching too high up and you need to look at some of the more entry-level positions. Clinical research coordinator, assistant, administrative assistant for a CRA at a CRO, in-house CRA. There's so many different CROs. Yes, there's regulatory, thank you, trial master file. There's so many different job titles out there, and there's no real consistency because every CRO and every sponsor is different and have their own titles. Just the easiest way to do this, go on Indeed.com, go on CareerBuilder.com, go on Monster.com, go on LinkedIn, go everywhere. There's tons of job boards, right? Just search clinical research. Don't put CRA because then you're only going to get the CRA jobs. Mm-hmm. And if you don't have enough experience, they're not going to call you, right? Even if you were in our CRA Academy and you have like 6 months of experience, I mean, you're much further ahead than someone who has zero experience. Sure. You might get an interview, but you should really look at the entry-level positions and then become a CRA, right? So the pay is not as good as a CRA.
No, but it's not bad.
And we have one student who got hired in August or September. She didn't even know that job existed, but she applied for it because it was on one of these job boards. And it wasn't a CRA. It was like an in-house admin.
Wasn't it regulatory?
No, she's helping CRAs with the startup activities. Okay. And she got hired, and she gets paid like $5,000 a year less than a CRA. And she does zero traveling. Yeah. I mean, you got it. There's a trade-off there. $5,000 for staying at home versus $5,000 more for living on an airplane. Right. So if you're not getting interviews or calls back from recruiters, it means you're probably reaching too high up, and you should just search clinical research on all these job boards. Right. Anything else? I guess we can spend the last 5 minutes on PI oversight and patient safety, because someone from the last webinar wanted us to talk about patient safety.
We covered that in the last webinar.
Yeah. Patient safety basically boils down to PI oversight, right?
Which we covered in the last webinar.
And there's certain things that only an MD, preferably the PI, can do. And these are things where,
doesn't have to, though.
Well, here's the example. So you need a clinician, an MD, preferably, or a DO. So sometimes in lab results, and this is
curveball. How about a PhD?
No, and for this example, I'm going to tell you.
Can you have a PhD as PI?
No, and for this example, I'm going to tell you.
But you can.
You can. And there are. Yeah. But for patient safety, right, here's why. And those PhDs who are PIs, they need to surround themselves, meaning like their sub-Is need to be MDs.
Right.
And here's why. When you get lab results from a patient, when you get an ECG result in a study, sometimes there are silent indicators that seem unimportant to someone who is looking, but is not knowledgeable enough to see it, or silent to a PI or a sub-I who's just not paying attention, right? That they're seemingly unimportant, but they become very important. They're like early indicators that, hey, something might be going on in this patient.
Right.
No one else can do that but an MD.
Correct.
Right? So that's PI oversight in a nutshell. What about an MD without a license in the U.S.? If you can, so you need a PI. To be a PI, you need an MD license in the U.S., or you could be a PhD.
Well, technically, as we found out.
Okay, go ahead.
Anybody could be a PI.
Yes.
Anybody can be a PI. However, as with the PhD example we were just discussing, you must be surrounded by MDs at that point.
Yes.
You have to have the medical knowledge to protect patient safety.
But it is also, yes, that's the textbook answer, but it is misleading.
Yeah, because most sponsors are not going to give
there you go.
somebody with a bachelor's degree a study and allow them to be PI.
Right. So there is no guidance in GCP and FDA that says a PI must be an MD, right? So yes, you're right. But the practical aspect here is that no sponsor is ever going to approve you.
It's not good for business development.
It's not. You're just making it much harder for yourself. So you can be a sub-I as an MD without a license in the U.S. And then these things we talked about, where looking at lab results and looking at ECGs, you may not necessarily be able to give your clinical opinion or declare something clinically significant or not clinically significant if you're not licensed in the U.S. However, you can certainly communicate your concerns to the PI, who's an MD,
Sure.
or the sub-I, who's an MD. In fact, we used to hire a lot of foreign MDs because of that, right?
Yeah, they don't make the greatest coordinators a lot of times, though.
Right, they have their drawbacks as well, but that's definitely one of their pluses.
Sure,
they're able to see these silent, seemingly unimportant indicators that something may be wrong with the patient.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe the study drug, maybe not, and then they can alert the PI or the sub-I about that. Someone else asked, what if the PI is unethical, patient safety issues directed to who? What if the PI is unethical? They love the safety stuff. I never figured that this would be important for our audience. What if the PI is unethical?
So
patient safety issues directed to who?
Who do you tell them in regards
to who's in safety if the PI is unethical?
Or who are you informing that the PI is not doing as they should? Is that the question?
It's open to interpretation.
What if the PI is unethical?
Patient safety issues directed to who?
Okay.
Well, patient safety is always PI issue. However, if you're a coordinator, if you're a sub-I and you notice some unethical stuff going on, and again, everyone has their own moral compass, but if it's impacting a patient life, I think it's your duty to let somebody know something's going on.
You never want to see somebody die or permanently injured or even injured at all.
Or taken advantage of.
Correct. But an MD has to be looking over these things. I mean, protect patient safety. As far as if you're going to tell somebody, I guess you would tell the sponsor, but I would stay away from that personally. But
and there's no right or wrong answer. I mean, look, if a coordinator is at an unethical site, I mean, I would recommend they try to find a new job ASAP.
Right.
But if they got bills to pay and kids to feed, I mean, who am I to tell them that they shouldn't stay there? Sure. It's not my business. However, I personally couldn't stay there for a long period of time. And, if compelled enough and I see that patients are either their health or their well-being is being put in danger, or if they're just being taken advantage of. So I've seen it. I've actually heard from other sites, from other coordinators in the past, that there have been sites that I don't know what the good word for it, but they would mislead patients. They would take advantage of a certain segment of patients and mislead them into what they're actually doing. They didn't. In many cases, the patients didn't really understand that they're in a clinical trial. So I personally don't like that stuff. I mean, most of you guys watching and listening would agree with me. If you're in that situation as a coordinator and an employee, obviously look to work somewhere else and do what you need to do to get another job. And then whether you want to blow the whistle on that PI or not, that's really up to you.
Yeah.
Thoughts, Mr. Sauber?
No, I agree.
All right, another question we'll go over. I'm waiting for a Christmas package to arrive, so we got some time.
Well, we got to leave here. I have to leave here in the next 5-10 minutes. I have to, real world problems, I have to drop off a package.
Okay, so 5 to 10 minutes, get your questions in. One more. If an unlicensed MD is a sub-I, won't the CRO request a medical license? No, they won't. I've been a sub-I before, and I'm not an MD.
Yeah, I've been a sub-I as well.
Anyone could be a sub-I if the PI says they're a sub-I.
Right. I believe the FDA states that anybody directly involved with the study, to any extent, is considered a sub-I, including the clinical research coordinators, everybody involved.
Now, because I haven't done a 1572 in a while, are they requiring coordinators to be listed in that box now?
I believe so.
Because that used to not be the case.
Yes. I can't remember the last time a 1572 was completed that did not require coordinator in the box 6.
And it's interesting because when I started, I would put the coordinators in that box, and the monitors told me, no, you don't do that. The coordinators don't go there. And now, 10 years later, it's the other way around. All right. Yes, CRC reported on 157. Okay. I don't know. Yes, CRC coordinators on the 1572. Another question, 1572 for coordinators. So, yeah, people are saying yes. So, yeah, when I started in 05, I was told no, but now it's yes. Thank you. Any more questions? Everyone's unmuted. You can unmute yourself. 5 minutes left, maybe 3. I'm going to end the Instagram live right now. Get your questions in, or we will end it.
Yes, we do teach classes. We have a CRA Academy. You can contact us. Where do they go, Dan, to find the information? thecraacademy.com?
Yes, thecraacademy.com. That was a softball question. I'm going to type it in here.
So, yes, if you go to thecraacademy.com, you can learn more about the classes. And you're welcome. Well, thank you so much there.
All right, so just wrapping up a webinar here. Impromptu end of year webinar, because we got to be consistent with doing it every month. The name of our CRO is DSCS-CRO. We have a website for that too. It's dscscro.com, strangely enough. Yeah.
Oddly.
Rather odd. We got our first CDA, so we just signed it. So hopefully that leads to our first project, which it's looking like it will. Right?
It does. No guarantees at this point, but definitely
no guarantees.
Promising.
Yeah, we're working out the deets right now, but yeah, looking good. All right, and everyone, if you want, I just finished the live stream on Instagram, so make sure you follow on Instagram as well. I'll be doing lots of live streams, more informal, impromptu type of things on Instagram Live, and also Snapchat. My username is Dan Sfera, so go there and check it out. And thank you all for coming on. I know it was short notice. I appreciate it. I was curious to see how many people would come on, and between Instagram and here, we had a good amount, and we only gave like 10 minutes notice.
That's good.
On a holiday week.
Yes, and speaking of which, Merry Christmas. Happy New Year.
Yep.
You and yours.
Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever applies to you, and then Happy New Year that applies to everybody, right?
That's right.
Thank you all very much. You can reach me on all the social platforms, Dan Sfera, and also 949-415-6256. We appreciate it, and we will see you guys all in 2017. Take care.